Hello and welcome to Feedback for the week of November 1st, 2011. We get it, guys. We didn't talk about the big games last week because we had a special guest, but that is why we're having two Game of the Weeks this week. Uncharted 3, Battlefield 3. Both of these gentlemen to my right reviewed those games, and they have some very interesting things to say about them both. Before we get started, though, I'll introduce the panel. The lovely Miss Jessica Chobot is here as usual. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
A man you might be familiar with as he hosted the show for a number of years, and he's been in video games for more of those years.
Since the Zygote.
Yeah. Mr. Adam Sessler is here as well.
Hi.
And then our resident first-person shooter and the only person to be almost as curmudgeonly as Adam some days. Mr. Matt Kyle is here as well, talking Battlefield 3. Before we get into the games, though, I wanted to start things off, warm up the panel a little bit with an intro round robin. With this, gameplay mechanics, graphics, and control scheme aside, which video game had the most emotional story? Well, one of the games of the week had an emotional story and one did not. How interesting. Was there a game that had you hooked solely because of its narrative? I will start with this. Custer's Revenge. It is a tale as old as time. A man makes his way across the plains and tries to rape an Indian lady. A story that's been told many times by Disney, but never really done properly. Custer's Revenge really resonates with me emotionally. Jessica, the look on your face is one of disgust.
What are you talking about?
It's only the greatest game of all time. And
Wait, he talks about this incessantly.
I'd say, what do you think,
Yeah.
guys?
This is the
I've
first
spent
I've ever
the
heard of
better
this.
part of 5 years here trying to get that game on XPlay.
Yeah.
It's
And
been
I-
on XPlay multiple times.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
You know what's funny is that we mosaic out the dot
20
matrix
Atari 2600.
non-movies that
Right.
are on. You know, I think as a child, I didn't even realize that was a woman.
Yeah, well, that's because the
I
graphics
just noticed
are,
the penis.
the graphics are so bad in that game. The pixelation, the resolution of the pixelation of the graphics is worse than when we remove the pixelation to blur things
Yeah, it might
out.
technically be
Cave
already censored.
Yeah, I
paintings
think
in
so.
France have told a stronger story visually than
Right.
anything you can find in that game.
Obviously, you guys, that's not the only game that's resonated emotionally. That was a joke. Jessica, what about you?
Oh, well, if you're going to go with that, I'm going to go with Oregon Story.
Okay.
Oregon Trail. I'm
I
sorry.
was like,
I'm sorry.
the story about
Yeah,
the
the
state?
story about
That
Oregon.
sounds
Yeah,
really
Oregon
boring.
Trail.
Oregon, yes.
The
Oregon
trail when they're trying to
It
get
was
through
very,
Oregon.
you know, I mean, I spent pretty much every lunch hour playing it because that was the only time in the library that the computer was free. And I sat there and purposely made sure that I didn't get enough supplies so that my kids would die along the way so I could visit their graves.
Most children's first experience with life-ending disease, I think.
Did you
Oregon Trail.
did
It
you
was
name your
dysentery.
kids after people you didn't like? Because I used
No,
to
that
do
wasn't
that.
until The Sims. When The Sims came out, I actually got all the cheats, and I'm sure everybody knows this, but I used to be married before, and I hated my mother-in-law, so what I would do is make a sim of her and then do the cheats so that I could pull the ladder out of the swimming pool, and so I'd have her swim forever, or I'd lock her up with like a bunch of fireplaces and a couple rugs and like watch her burn to death. One time I locked her up in this tower with no food or water, and it took me 3 real-life days to kill her.
Wow. That's actually better than the last 19 Saw movies.
Yeah,
That plot.
Yeah.
Well
Yeah.
done.
yeah. That was I used to also I would mentally assign identities to the.
Close there, Adam.
No,
Close there.
Adam has slowly moved away.
No, I would mentally assign identities to the survivors in Choplifter and not rescue the ones that were the people I didn't like.
Nice.
Wow.
You and I are on the same.
Well, that's an
page.
emotionally resonant game, I guess.
Adam, can you make your way back into the conversation without getting
Yeah.
any closer to Jeff? I'm so scared.
To be fair, I don't think any story has actually resonated emotionally. I just don't. I think maybe games can get to that. It's just it's not part of what it is. Now there are games that have affected me probably a little more as a critic emotionally. Uncharted 2, just kind of getting to the end and like wow.
That
You know,
was an
somebody did
experience.
that, you know?
Right.
That was absolutely incredible. I think instances in Heavy Rain. I think when you're deciding whether or not to take off one of your phalanges, I was like, I was running out of the room going, what do I do? What do I do? I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. I think a lot of games that give you choice, like in The Witcher, where you just don't know, am I doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and I can't figure out. Though I think at the end of the day, the most resonant moment I had was in Knights of the Old Republic, the original, where I think there was a woman that has been assaulted. You hear about that in the beginning, and you have the option of doing it, of getting back at that guy for her, or kind of ratting her out. I think it was the first time I remember being presented with that kind of a choice in a game, and I kind of went ahead and ratted her out and had a panic attack because I realized that I had my DSL line into the Xbox for Xbox Live, and just my brain was like, I think I might have been reported as a bad person.
I've just been
And it
red
really
flagged.
was this moment of great anxiety, and I just quickly turned it off.
And that's
then went
weird
and did
because
the good thing.
you always play evil.
Well, I think that was
Well,
it. That
obviously,
was my
that was his
threshold.
turning point.
That was my breaking of the seal. And it's like,
Okay.
once you're doing that, it's like, I just had a drink, so I'm doing meth for the rest of my life.
'Cause
Right.
I do remember in that game there was the woman on Tatooine, and her husband had died, and all she had was the raid plate. It was like the only valuable thing she had, and one of the things you could do was you could buy it from her and then like go sell it and then give her the money, and that was like pure light side. And that's what I did in my own playthrough. But I wanted to be evil in the video review we did, so I mind tricked her to sell it to me for half price, and she's like, I don't want to do this, but I
My
am. And
hand's not
I felt
listening to my
so
brain.
awful the whole time, and it was weird because it was just you play that now and you're just like, oh, these don't even look like humans really.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
at the
The
time,
sociopathy is
at
much
the time
easier
I
now.
was just like, it's such a horrible misuse of force power. I shouldn't even be doing this, and it was.
It's interesting how those kind of games give those choices. I always play good because I feel so guilty if I play evil. And I want to play evil because I think it'd be more fun, but I always default to good because I swear to God, I hear my mother's voice in my head. And she's like, you shouldn't do that.
See, I've always found it that I think I feel so like devalued and pointless in my actual existence, just sort of a cog in a machine that hasn't told me its purpose, that I need to do something where I'm very
You need
clear and
destruction.
decisive in my fantasy life.
I do I play good the first time through because the first time through is me. And that's what I did the first time I encounter everything. That's me. And then the second time, that character is someone else.
I've tried to do that on second playthrough, and I'll get about halfway playing maybe evil because I always play good, and then all of a sudden it occurs that I'm just like, I can't do this. And
I
then
feel
have to,
terrible.
And then I have to shift. However, unless the game actually is easier on one of those other modes, I usually default to the easiest, so that's usually when I will, trade over.
And yeah, Knights of the Old Republic was good about that. Quick and easy path.
Yeah.
A lot of games where you can do the good bad split, I think everyone's gotten better at this, but the bad responses always look like it would close you out from some sort of avenue of game.
Yeah.
And I think that's another reason why people go good. 'Cause you're like, sure, I'll go get a fish for you.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll go save you from something.
That's always my concern. Is it's not that I feel bad when I make bad decisions. My concern is that when they develop the game, I feel like if I make bad decisions, it's going to keep me from the better part of the game. Like
Yeah.
that generally good people made this game, and they're going to punish me by not opening up as much of the world. They make up for that by making bad powers are always visually way cooler than good powers. Even if it's the same lightning, red lightning is way cooler than blue lightning, always. But other than that, I it's never a question of whether or not I should be doing this because I'm a good or bad person. It's like I just feel like good people get a better game somehow.
Taking the middle road, too, is
bad
always
people
a
make
bad
more
way to
money.
go because
No.
then you get neither of either side.
That's what I
And
learned at Knights of the Old Republic.
That's what I learned in the first Mass Effect, is that I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to behave. That was the first time I've come up to a game where it gave me a lot of choice and that I really decided I was going to go with it. And I was just making choices that I would for myself in normal everyday life, and some were bad and some were good. And I was thinking, okay, I'm accomplishing my goal here. Like, we're getting to the end of this game. And then all of a sudden, I get to the game and I've missed so much stuff because I had no idea that I was supposed to be 100% bad or 100% good. I thought I was just playing as a normal person was supposed to play, and then surprise.
I think games are getting to the point where it becomes a little bit more of a reflection of who you are, if you really want to find that out. But I think at the end of the day, I just feel bad when I make a decision.
On that note, Matt, let's talk about the Battlefield 3 server issues before we get into your review of the game. The server issues, at this point, we're a week out from the game. For the most part, things have been fixed, but man, that first week was rough for them.
It was tough. EA is claiming that there were no issues with the PC and PS3. They were mostly stable, and the Xbox 360. Originally, they said they had 95% stability, and now they've moved that up to something like 98.6 stability or something. Which is normal.
How do you qualify that, by the way?
We didn't. I mean, I was playing the PC version and the 360 version. I never really encountered a point where I was locked out of the PC version to any degree. My stats weren't updating on Battlelog, which is a whole separate thing. But Like, but in the 360 version, I mean, we got kicked from a bunch of games, but that's not anything unusual for any game, really.
Right.
So, I mean, it didn't feel that bad playing over the weekend. I know some people had problems, and it was probably like a more regional thing because servers are up here, servers are not up here, you know. But yeah, the usual problems for a launch. And as the head of DICE said in an interview the week before the game launched, Bad Company 2 didn't even work.
Right.
Launched it. It was like, you know, people forget that like, you know, Bad Company 2 was worse than this. Well, really worse. Because Abby and I didn't even play that game for a month. Because I reviewed that game, but then after it came out, like Abby and I were going to play it, and we were like, oh, this doesn't work. Let's come back in a month. And we did, and it was great.
And it was totally fine.
But is that a good enough excuse to say that you're having issues with this particular game just because that one had issues?
I don't know.
I think they're playing on people's nostalgia. Like, remember how much you loved that game eventually? Just forgive us this
That
right
was
here.
in somewhat response to the beta, where people were like, this is horrible. And he's like, yeah, it is. It's a beta. It's, you know, it's like,
That makes
This is what we're
sense,
putting
but
out
when you
so we
have
can
a-
eventually fix our problems. The big question before we actually get into talking about the game, you're a guy, you play all first-person shooters, and typically you try to play it on the PC, the 360, the PS3. You try to experience it all. They did say, Nicole from G4TV.com did reach out to EA, and they said, listen, we had an unprecedented level of online activity.
Yeah.
We
Fastest
had
selling
we
EA
could
game
not
ever.
we could not possibly anticipate. We
They
like
could
to
anticipate because
we
the
like to think-
pre-orders indicated that this was going to be
but we,
big.
you know, they're like, we like to think
Although,
that we
you
were
know.
set up for 6 million people playing online, not 400 million people playing online. But they eventually got it fixed. My question though is, does this hurt the game at all? They fixed things for the most part within a week of launch. Does this hurt a first-person shooter? And does it hurt a game like Battlefield 3 that most people, I'm assuming, are buying not for the single-player campaign?
not
They
at
want to
all.
play multiplayer immediately. Should this have been ready to go from the gate?
well, of course, it should have been ready to go, but does it hurt them?
Yeah.
No. They sold 5 million copies of it. You've got your money.
Right.
Like, you know, and it's not like, what are people going to do? Sell the game? Like, you know, it's not going to happen. Like, people are just going to sit there and complain on the internet, and then it'll work, and they'll be fine.
Well, I ended up playing multiplayer last night on 360, and I didn't really have any issues with it. We didn't get, you know, there was a little warning icon up at the top that said we were aware of the issues with some of the quick matches, but we're solving that. But I was able to get into everything, and I think I only had maybe 2 instances of lag, and that could very well have been my connection because I'm running
it's
off
been
of
a very
wireless.
solid game from my end. I mean, yeah, everyone's experience is different. I mean, it took me 3 hours to get the game to work on the PC. Some people probably installed it and it was fine.
Yeah.
But
as
everyone's
someone
experience varies on that stuff.
who has had a lot of experience with the internet in the past week. You know, because some person's bitching and his other friends get in on the bitching, I think there's become this real sense of perspective problem that's occurred where, you know, here we have all these websites who are desperate to find a story, and somehow, like, we all seem to think that, like, if we can get the negative, we're going to get a lot more attention to it. Hone in on that, and it sort of amplifies problem into something far more significant than it actually was. And
Sure.
it's, you know, I don't know if they're numbers of 95 and 98, which just
Yeah, I
sounds
don't
so nominal. But, you know, I've been hearing the same thing. Most people I know that are normal people that don't just sort of hang out in the dark corners of a message board have only come up to me saying how much they're enjoying Battlefield 3 and want my gamer tag and they want to play with me.
Sure.
That, yeah, there's issues. And I think more reasonable people know that when you deal with things online, instability is a matter of course and it's something that fixes itself. And that, you know, once again, there's just a skewed section that somehow is possessed not only of a sense of entitlement, but also the sense that perfection is just pervasive.
Well, I think you get that kind of attitude, and I'm not necessarily condoning this, but I do understand where now we've got to remember, a lot of these people that are buying these games are, for lack of a better term, kids or young adults that don't really have a lot of money. And so if you're going to spend that money and spend that time, and that's your only 60, however, couple bucks you've got on this game that you've been waiting and pre-ordering for forever, you expect it to work when you play it. I mean, we don't expect anything else that we buy to not work. So why is this?
Right, but how many people did this actually affect? I mean, that's the
Well,
thing.
no,
is
I
that
don't know, but I'm just saying I
we
can
see
see
these
that
stories all
attitude.
over the place, and with the quality journalism that seems to be practiced on the internet,
Because if your
no one
copy
has
of
found the
Battlefield is
numbers.
working, if it's working, you're not online complaining, you're playing Battlefield. So it's like,
Yeah,
hard to- you
exactly.
don't really
It's just
have
it's that the
a workable sample.
Right.
and who knows? I mean, one other thing I've learned in the past week is people seem to hold opinions with things they have no empirical data based on.
Sure.
And so I would not be surprised if there's another section that just feels like trolling and is making claims to things that don't exist. And the necessary diligence, EA's not going to tell us what the facts are. But it's like that. I think there's once again another skewed perspective because it's like on launch day you're going to have the largest number of people that are happening at any one time.
And I think you're what it is exacerbating it is the battle log situation where you have to be logged into battle, especially in the PC, where you have to be logged into battle log to play the game. Period. Like you have to launch the multiplayer from that. There is no menu or interface in the game itself. And and if battle log goes down, you can't log into the EA servers on the console versions. You can't play online either. And it's just sort of one of those things. I think people resent that element of like because it's like one thing if you can't connect and it's just like can't connect to the server, but when it's just like failed to connect to EA online, you're like
It's your fault.
Well, it's also,
I want to blame Time Warner for
I have
this,
to
not
say
Electronic Arts.
That battle log interface on the PC is just garish and weird.
It's pointless.
It really is a strange decision, and it is. I mean, usually I make fun of people who are so afraid of change in the video game industry, but here's one where I didn't realize what I was supposed to do because I thought I just kind of got moved to a web page to be sold something, which is part of what it was doing. But
Absolutely.
I didn't touch on Battlelog in the review because I felt like I was reviewing the game that DICE made, not the social media thing that EA foisted upon the game. Because I know DICE made Battlelog as well, but I have a feeling that may not have been.
They didn't
What?
take,
They're
they
not
didn't-
wholly
an idea.
autonomous
they didn't
entity?
take the
Yes.
initiative on that one.
Maybe
They-
not. Maybe
they were
so.
told.
Maybe not. I don't know. But all I know is that I don't need another layer of interface between me and my game.
Right.
And the idea of a social network style thing like that for one game is absurd.
Right.
Because it's like, okay, look, if I want to play with someone on Battlefield, I have my Xbox friends list, I have my PSN friends list, I have my Steam friends list, AIM, my cell phone's address book, my email address book, people I live with, the people I see at work. It's like I have not had a problem finding people to play Battlefield with over the last 9 or so years that this series has existed. And all of a sudden, giving me a social network lookalike, Facebook lookalike that that is only for one game and that people I know are only logged into if they are already playing that game is not useful to me.
Yeah.
Especially when you make me go through it to launch my game that I have installed on my PC that I have bought that I need.
Right.
It's this interference, intrusive, like you're playing an EA game kind of thing. And it's just like, will you leave me alone and let me shoot people in the head? It's
And unfortunately, I
The
think
American conundrum.
We're going to see a lot more of that in the coming years as well. So this is just
I just
unfortunately.
wish it
the
was
tip.
more like clearly it's kind of the same permutation as Autolog on Need for Speed
Sure.
Hot Pursuit, which was intensely useful and unobtrusive.
Sure. It
Whereas
made
this
me
is
want to be
not.
competitive. I don't care if you're playing Battlefield.
Yeah.
But I did care if you had raced that race before me because I really want to be
Yeah.
your time and I want to rub it in your face. But speaking of your review, these two games, Battlefield 3 and Modern Warfare 3, the amount of marketing hype surrounding it's like two wrestlers in the 80s going at it. I was really excited for this game considering how much they were just going directly after Modern Warfare 3. And it
Or
doesn't
Andre the Giant.
or Andre the
Yeah,
Giant
in
or
this-
Piper, but to be frank, and you said so in your review, you're going after a game that is known for a very cinematic single player experience, and their marketing has basically indicated that we have achieved the level of cinematic experience that the Modern Warfare series has, and that marketing
also,
was a
I
lie.
just want to point out when they first showed it off. They showed off the single-player campaign. They did not
Constantly.
show the multiplayer. And I was there, and it's funny. I was very impressed
Yeah,
watching it.
it was
looked like, okay, they may have something.
It was gripping. It was engaging. The demo we had where you're crawling around, the sniper sniping at you,
Yeah.
that we had on our stage looked fantastic. I have now had the opportunity to experience that within the context of the full game, and it's not really that engaging. So on a
No.
single player level, not there.
Total loss.
Absolutely.
Really?
It's
Because I have to say, as a person that doesn't really play a lot of first-person shooters, I didn't think it was mind-blowing by any means, but it certainly looked good, and I had fun with it. I didn't.
really? It definitely looks good.
I mean, it looks good. I
don't
actually
care, but
I like playing it because I'm fascinated by how something that looks like it should be exciting could put me to sleep.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's very hard to figure out.
This is something that should be taken into game design classes and deconstructed because I can't put my finger on it.
Well, I think it
Well, I
holds you at
wasn't
arm's length.
bored. Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. I wasn't bored. I wasn't put to sleep by it, but I definitely see that it is maybe a single player game that, when I feel like shooting something, I'll pop it in for a couple hours.
But
and
do you
then
have
I'll
any
be done.
adrenaline? I mean,
But
do you feel that that sense of excitement that you should be getting from a shooter?
I feel a sense of accomplishment, but I don't feel a sense of excitement. And maybe that's accomplishment on a personal level because I don't normally play these types of games, and so I was like, "Ooh, I did it!"
I mean, I feel a sense of accomplishment when I chop carrots and I don't bleed.
Yeah.
So
I think we can draw
Definitely-
accomplishment for a number of
I
different
don't feel
things.
like it doesn't go anywhere, and there's an element of kind of a. It's an element of like in the sense that like Modern Warfare, the campaign doesn't make sense. The story is just sort of nonsense, and the framing device, which I would guess came later, the interrogation.
didn't they do that in
things.
Black Ops?
Yeah, they did.
Don't they
in
do
Black
this in
Ops.
like half of games?
Yeah.
To be fair, Battlefield's like the way Battlefield does it isn't even a third as obnoxious as the way Black Ops does it. But the fact that it's just sort of like these guys like it's like we have no proof that you did this. We don't. Where did you get this phone? We don't know. You say you took it off this guy, but we don't. And it's like he took it off this guy in a Marine Osprey, leaving the scene with 3 other people in it. And it's like, well, we can't corroborate that story. It's like, yes, you can, because it's these things called debriefings. I don't know if you've ever known how the military loves paperwork and records, but there would be someone who wrote that down, that happened. Like it's they have a thing that they think your main guy, Sergeant Blackburn, is a traitor, and they give him a lot of heat on that, and and they have a good reason for it, as you find out near the end. From their perspective, you can definitely see that, but they call into question his whole story over the course of like 2 weeks of operations, and it's just like no, like generally the military is pretty sure what happens in those situations. I think.
Considering they spent over $1 trillion in taxpayer money for those 2 weeks of operations, they
just
know
feels
every
like
single thing that's going on.
It's just like one of those like Modern Warfare like kind of does the big, loud, crazy Michael Bay sort of blockbuster movie, and you're just like. It's like, this doesn't make sense, but I don't have time to worry about that kind of thing. Because things are blowing up around me, and I need to... And this one is like a TV movie made out of a C-list Tom Clancy book. It's just sort of quiet and folded in, and it takes place at night a lot, and there's not really any variety, and it doesn't build on what makes Battlefield, which is like you've got huge open areas, you've got vehicles, and instead of just being on foot, and the one bright spot in the game for me was driving the tanks, which is not something that I thought I would say after we were in
after we experienced
I had
at
become
E3.
suspicious of the single player because of the tank demo.
Yeah.
Little did I know it would actually probably be the most dynamic sequence.
Puts
in the
you in
game.
a
think they were
vehicle
sitting
in a
there-
wide open thing, and you can drive wherever you want. And you have to complete your objectives, but it's like, oh, this is not something I did in Modern Warfare, and it feels more like Battlefield. Whereas earlier in the plane, I knew I was in trouble when they said that the character I was playing in the plane sequence was female because women can't fly frontline combat jets. And so I'm like, wait a minute. Like, are you breaking...
That's not a criticism. That's a
No,
fact.
yeah, that's an actual...
That's absolutely true. Because I'm like,
Jessica's hand
clarify.
slowly curls over a pin, and she takes
that
the
is,
lid
that is
off.
one of the weird inequality things right now. He's like, you can't, if you're a woman, you cannot fly like an F-18 on the front lines in the Navy.
Right.
They don't allow that for some reason.
Women can't be on the front lines of anything, right?
No,
Yeah.
but like even in a kind of a removed role of like 30,000 feet, like you're not allowed to.
Huh, interesting.
But so I'm like, okay, well, what's going on here? So of course, I climb in the back as the F-18 gunner, performing functions that the person in the back of an F-18 doesn't actually perform. But
You mean there's no gunner bubble in the back of the F-18 jet?
I mean,
That's
there
not how
are
that thing
two-seater
works?
F-18s, but I've
Wait, it's
never
not like
heard of.
R2D2?
I've never
Yeah.
heard of one. I've never heard of one that gave up gunner. I mean, that's like what the F-14 rear seater does. I didn't. If an F-18 can do that, I didn't know they could. So.
I am impressed with your level of
was about
military
to say.
aircraft
I know.
knowledge, sir.
When I was a
Well
kid,
done.
I wanted to fly F-16s. That's what I want to do. I want to join the Air Force and fly F-16s.
I just
That
learned
was my
something new
original
about
idea.
Matt Kyle. Just
And then
now.
I decided I probably couldn't hack that. But it's on rails. You're not flying the plane,
Right.
And that carries over into a multiplayer problem because that means you have nowhere to practice the planes
Right.
in multiplayer,
and you get
which are
thrust
very
in,
hard to fly.
And you get thrust into almost immediate. I mean, it's not something that you have to play 20 hours of multiplayer to experience. You can get into a position where, like you said, Matt started playing multiplayer. He gets in a tank and he's like, I don't know how to drive a tank really. I should
yes.
go drive around. And then at some point, the human being in the tank with him goes, look, I'm really enjoying the tour of this city. But if we can go blow some shit up right now, that would be
he's
awesome.
he's like, I'm really
and Matt's like,
enjoying the
I don't even know how
driving
to turn left.
and
Give me some time, man.
And mind you, like this is like this was like 4 days before the game came out.
Right.
Like I'm just like, no, I have not memorized the maps of the game that is not released yet. I'm sorry, I'm not there yet. It was literally the first thing I did in the game.
Right.
Period. Like spawn, get in tank, drive for a minute, bitched at by random guy. It was the perfect online multiplayer
Right.
Dude,
experience.
I was just happy that I actually shot somebody.
Oh,
like,
it's
I
just a
actually
thrill
got,
every
I
time.
got one kill, and I was like, oh, my night's over. This is awesome.
It's all good.
Oh my
That-
God.
Battlefield
make
is
s'mores now.
great because it's so chaotic and so the
It's
scope of it's so
insane.
big that even I have hundreds of kills on that game, and every single time the enemy killed 100 thing pops up, there's a little thing in my brain that goes, we did it! It's just I can't believe it happened.
There's the joy of Battlefield is that weird organic development where I think I tend to feel like if I'm playing random matches, which I don't do all that frequently, I start to feel camaraderie very quickly in Battlefield.
Sure.
Whereas something like Call of Duty, I'm more concerned that oh God, everyone hates me, or
Right.
it's just I am thinking a lot more for myself because there's just that moment of invention that can come out of Battlefield that really is at the core of that game,
and
which is
the
missing in
multiplayer,
single player.
obviously, people are frankly, if the single player had been standalone, that the game would be like a 2 or a 3. It's not good, but it doesn't matter in this game so much.
Sure.
I mean, it's part of the game, so I had to kind of take that into account when I was reviewing it and scoring it. But the point is multiplayer. I'm sure a lot of people won't even play the single player.
No. If it was just released as multiplayer, do you think it would have felt lacking?
I think people would have accused it as such. I don't think I would have felt. I might have said oh, it'd be cool if they had a campaign like Modern Warfare is, but then what I was picturing in my head when I said that would not be what we got.
Right.
Right.
So-
I think it's interesting because they went ahead and did have the single player, and I think they've besmirched their name with the single player that they would not have done had it just been released as the multiplayer.
I'll be skeptical of the next one. I think, but here's the thing. Bad Company 2's campaign wasn't that bad. And
Right.
it was,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, Bad
it was
Company 2
much
had
more
characters
open.
that you cared
Well, yes,
about.
It had
They were
actual
interesting.
characters in it, and the dialogue was funny. I mean, I think
Yeah.
those characters are great, and I would be upset if one of those characters died
Right.
in the story. And then, I mean, the characters die in the Battlefield 3 story, and I had to look at them and check their names and figure out who they were. I was like,
You're the guy
It's
who
like
said
going
we're
through a bunch
crossing
of
borders now,
exercises.
dog.
It's
Yeah.
like going
Well,
through
no,
a bunch
it's
of
like a tech demo.
exercises rather than anything else.
It's a tech demo. The AI only does what it's supposed to do, which I think is where where the lack of excitement seems to come from the game. That you don't feel that
It also
there's
does
something
a lot
dynamic.
of things it's
and
not supposed to
happening.
do, like shove me into out of
Push you out of cover.
Push me out
Because
of
you're,
cover.
you're where the AI
Constantly.
wants to go.
Yeah.
The AI is going to be told to go
Right.
there. But I'm talking the enemies. They're just going to, they're going to come over the fence the same way. They're going to go
Yeah.
run
Right.
down the path the same way. I mean, that's like 90s stuff. I mean,
Right.
I was a little bit stunned that when you have something that technically proficient visually,
Right.
that actually comes, I think, with the presumption that you will see the same level of efficiency in the under the hood aspects of the game. And
Right.
I was actually a little bit stunned.
Do we see a future where, and this is something I'd be interested in because I played the single player campaign, wasn't all that impressed, but again, I'm not really a big first person shooter single player guy anyway, but I just feel like even if it was great, there's so many first person military shooters out there. What Battlefield does really well, I think, is multiplayer. They are, I really think, at the top of the food chain as far as multiplayer is concerned. Do we see a $40 Battlefield multiplayer game?
I think they should move to a subscription
Do we
model.
do we see
I mean,
something like that?
That's
Can
what
we?
I think.
I mean,
I think
could
that
they move the
depends on how
franchise in
well
that
Call of
direction?
Duty XP does.
Very interesting.
I mean, that's the thing, is that with Battle Log and with the single player, there's that feeling of catch-up. And you know what?
Sure.
I think it wouldn't be something that I find so notable had Riccatello not made these obnoxious juvenile statements about what he wants to have happen to Call of Duty, had they have had the marketing campaign not so painted a target on Call of Duty. It's like, dude, if you're going to get in the ring, bring the penis. And I just like, they
Wait.
What?
Let me just, everybody take a moment to commit that to memory so we can all use it in our lives at some point. And credit Adam Sessler.
I can't wait for the next time a GameStop employee screws me over.
If you're
I'm using that one.
If you're going to take my pre-order money, bro, bring the penis.
I'm not saying don't market your game, and it was already implicit who they were going after.
Above
but
and
once
beyond
they
the
decided
call.
to just kind of, just make that lob that first,
Ball?
volley.
Right.
It's like, well, you know what? That should mean that you have sufficient armaments. And it was just, it's a little bit surprising to see Battlelog, which is underdeveloped and seems to be cobbled together in response to XP, and a single player campaign that doesn't even hold up a candle
Right.
to what we've got,
But-
even out of the worst of the Call of Duty.
But you've
single
still got,
players.
10 million shipped, 5 million sold. That's good numbers.
Oh, I know.
The problem is,
That's good numbers because Call of Duty
Because-
or Modern Warfare 3 isn't out yet.
I mean, hey, that's almost half of what Call of Duty will sell in the first day.
Right.
It's great.
right.
But it's like the problem I have with it is like, why? Why would you do? It's like it's the same way where like MMOs trying to take on World of Warcraft,
Yeah.
and it's like you don't have to aim for the 800-pound gorilla Death Star monster at the top of the mountain.
Sure.
You can just do what you do, and like there's no reason for Battlefield. I feel like would have been better off without directly going after Call of Duty with the all above and beyond the call taglines.
Yeah,
That's-
they're
just
asking
let
for
it-
comparison.
I mean, people want to play it regardless, and let it evolve. And maybe in a year or two, if it is on par with, if they become natural equal competitors, then you've got a fight on your hands.
Let
But
it
trying to
encompass-
manufacture this thing seems risky to me
Well,
because you
that's-
might get backlash from people who might have been interested in both, but then they're like loyalty to Call of Duty can't promote. We've seen people that like don't want to play like multi-platform games that that used to be PS3 or Xbox exclusive because they've betrayed them. Final Fantasy
Sure.
13, and it's like platform and system and title and franchise loyalty is so crazy in this hobby that like why would you even want to like draw that battle line like artificially? Like
Right.
let people who are interested in that genre play your game and the other game and decide.
I agree with you.
No, and you know what it does is it just once again it plays to the most juvenile and asinine aspect of the gaming industry, and for something that is a market leader like Electronic Arts, it's a little bit shocking. And as I've joked, but I'm really not joking. Bobby Kotick looks restrained and adult, and the leader of an actual multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation. And I have to say that I think
Words
EA
I
looks-
never thought I'd hear coming out of
I
your
know,
mouth.
and I just at the moment I think EA, especially not really kind of providing that package that really makes the strongest case. Because I never thought Battlefield 3 would beat Modern Warfare 3. I thought with Battlefield 3, if they had actually brought the goods, could in the successive years start to take the crown as
Sure.
fatigue starts to come in on Modern Warfare. And I think by not having the total package when promising that they have a much steeper hill to climb.
I think that's an interesting question in that like because you look at the numbers of people who play Call of Duty online and they fall somewhat short of the number of people who buy Call of Duty.
Oh, yeah.
So clearly a lot of people are just playing the campaign and that's what they're there for. So I would say it is in Battlefield's interest to step up that aspect of it in their next
I mean, I
attempt.
think there's some crazy stuff. Like 20% of people who own a 360 don't know it goes online. So I mean,
Right.
there is a significance to that single player market, especially since multiplayer, since they don't have a subscription model yet. You're still only making money off of multiplayer on the initial purchase.
Right.
I mean, but also let's not get too down on this, because it needs to be remembered that the multiplayer
Yeah,
on
it's
Battlefield
really
3
good.
is
It's really
amazing,
good.
and it's
Right.
like nothing else on the shelves, which is what really sets it. You don't have the jets and the helicopters and the vehicles, which really do add a different. You're not just on the ground shooting people in the face, which is one reason everybody hates the Operation Metro map in Battlefield because there are no vehicles.
Right.
You're just deathmatching, and it's just sort of irritating.
And you've been
but
there before.
but it's just we played it a lot. I would still be playing it more every night if there wasn't another game that had showed up that has demanded my attention, which we'll talk about in a
In
week
the
or
coming
two.
weeks.
But if only you could ride a dragon.
Yeah, that would be
in
amazing.
Battlefield 3, I'd still be
Man,
with
if I
you.
could see a
But-
dragon fight a bear
Yeah,
in a
it'd be
Modern Warfare
amazing.
setting, it would be so good.
Yep.
I'm so
But
jealous of you.
it's the multiplayer is amazing, and it's probably the best multiplayer game on the market right now.
Right.
Outside of possibly Team Fortress 2, which also gets points for being free. But like if you look at Battlefield at all and are like, oh, that looks kind of interesting, just play the multiplayer. Like, don't even look at the single player. Jump into multiplayer. Jump into co-op, which I actually like better than the Modern Warfare Spec Ops stuff, because Spec Ops is little bite-sized tasks, whereas the co-op in Battlefield 3 is
Right.
a six full-fledged missions with variety, and one of them you're co-piloting a helicopter with your co-op buddy, and it's a much more involved experience, and I'm actually really glad they put those co-op missions
All right,
in.
so buy Battlefield 3 for the multiplayer, and when you have a free 3 hours to kill, you can play through the entire single-player campaign.
Yeah,
So
very
do that
short.
as well.
And realize that like the reason we're kind of down on the single player so much over like because it seems like such an inexplicable
Yeah.
error.
Failure.
Yeah.
And we want it to be better.
Right.
It should be better, and I think it will be next time. And we'll see if EA tries to make this series into a yearly event.
I think they will. Look, this is usually where we would go into a news story, but in the interest of time, and also something we're introducing new, we're actually going to do an entire fan feedback section because your questions are important. When we do this stuff on X-Play, we get so many good things to talk about.
You can't do questions because you don't have an iPad.
Yes, that's true. You're right.
That's better.
It feels weird. We're going to let Jessica lead this section from here on out, and we're also going to, if your question does get picked as a question of the week, we're going to give you a prize pack. This week we've got some cool things from Bethesda to give out in honor of
Hunted the Demon's Forge.
Hunting the Demon's Forge 2 is coming out. They've got some DLC for that. Brink selling 4 copies. But we're going to give out a Bethesda prize pack. But Jessica, if you could take this away, please.
Absolutely. Herb Welch said, considering Battlefield 3's campaign, back on Battlefield 3, Rage's disappointing story arc, Call of Duty's Michael Bay atmosphere, and the cliche plots of games like Crysis and Homefront, has the FPS genre become void of true single-player experiences? Will gamers have to play RPGs in order to get a half-decent story out of their games?
Did we ever get a half-decent story out of FPSs?
Yeah, I can't remember a time where I really felt
Quake? Like, what does that mean?
BioShock is the only thing that's out there.
Well, isn't the criticism that they have moved into trying to tell a story in FPSs where they used to just be pure gameplay?
Mm-hmm.
You get your hybrids exactly. BioShock would be a great
But I
example.
still think even in today's the gaming space today, even if you're getting a story in a first-person shooter, you're not getting that story in the gameplay. You're getting that story in the cutscenes, and anybody can do stories in a cutscene. I think
Half-Life is has always been held up as the story is being told without having to go to the
right, and that's what makes an RPG I think so great and so engaging is that you are actively creating your character's story in the way that you level him up and the things that he wears. Wow, RPGs are a lot just like dress up.
Yeah,
actually, now that I think about it,
to me, the best
Final
story I've
Fantasy
ever been
X.
told the best story I've ever been told in an FPS is still Marathon, which came out around the same time as Doom. So everyone's still playing catch up to Bungie, including Bungie.
And then, having said that, it is available on the 360. I'm not recommending that you play it unless you like vomiting.
Nausea induced. I don't get some people get motion sick when they play first person shooter. I do not get motion sick for any reason except playing Marathon 2 on the 360. It just something about it was just like, oh, I got to stop this. It's something about that. It's so smooth that your brain just goes short circuit. But if you can find, I don't know if you can still buy it online. I think they released it as freeware or something maybe, but just find Marathon and play it, and it's got great stories. It's all in text, so be ready.
Right. And I think last year there was some mention. I think we did a story on G42.com about them potentially remaking it as well.
I think there was
talk about that
was a
as well?
belief that Halo 4 might be circling back to Marathon 1, which has obviously proven false.
Right.
So
343 and Microsoft really haven't said anything. So I think it's funny how hopes turn into potentialities on the internet without the influence or input of anybody responsible.
I love how you keep bringing it back to this one thing that you
What could be
experienced this
burning
week.
me?
So interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting. Do we see? I mean, is there a place for a really strong story? Today's first-person shooters, like you said, they're all about action. This kinetic, frenetic action. Do we see stories? Do we want stories in first-person shooters?
I want Bioshock
I
Infinite
think-
just for that reason.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is room for story arc in first-person shooters. I would like to see that happen more often. It'd be a nice change of pace just to kind of. I feel like FPSs as well as they fill that particular void in gaming could definitely use kind of a light under their ass to try something new. Because I just feel like it's a little over.
I think the problem is there's no need for the light, and that I was just kind of doing this on the soapbox when it comes to review scores and stuff. The market, by the kids getting all whipped into just a lathery frenzy over Battlefield 3 versus Modern Warfare 3, has just reestablished that all you need to do is just have this exact same type of shooter, and you just make ducats. Rage did try to do something different. We don't know what the numbers are yet, but I don't think it's necessarily going to deliver like we thought. And the BioShock franchise does okay, but I think that 2K recognizes that the same way that Warner Brothers looked at having Kubrick as their director. It's kind of a Rosetta Stone that they can sort of brag and show off and sort of and help with their branding.
I don't think you're ever gonna have what you're saying is have it take over that first person.
We're not going to
genre.
need story in games until people who buy games want story in games.
Right.
I would like to, me being one of those people, I would like to see maybe a little subgenre of first-person shooters maybe grow a little bit with a little bit more story. I mean, obviously, you're not going to get rid of the Battlefield 3s or the Call of Duties, but and neither should you. But it would be nice to see maybe a little bit more attention paid to this little subgenre of first-person shooters.
I mean, I think the way they're looking at it. I mean, also first-person shooters. is kind of a dead term. I think we have shooters.
Sure. Yeah,
You know,
I would
I
agree
mean,
with that.
really, like what's Gears of War? Just because the camera's pulled back, and
Sure.
that's a shooter. And
Mass
like strangely enough, when you can see the character, we are seeing greater efforts made at making story in those games.
Right.
I mean, say what you will about the quality of Gears 3's story. There's a lot more narrative there than I think you're getting out of stuff where you're actually seeing it from the first person.
Well, I think people
perspective.
should really go back to the lessons of Valve.
Yeah.
And Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 still has
One of those lessons is take 10 years.
Right. It's part of that. But look at I think one of the series that has kind of struggled with its identity and how to tell its own story is Resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And they've changed their ideas on what that game should be pretty much all three
Yeah.
times. And the third one, which is I think takes a lot of influence from Half-Life.
Yeah.
Which was also pointed out by Yahtzee on his Zero Punctuation review, which was actually a very good observation, which I hadn't really considered all that much. Like, it was much more of a taking lessons from Valve's game than I really thought it was. And there's probably no one better to learn from in that regard, I would say.
No, I would
Study
agree.
Half-Life.
Over and over and over again.
Don't just play it. Study it.
Right. What's next, Jess?
All right, number 2, Vicious Smith. I think that's how we're pronouncing it. A lot of big deal games have already come out. There's a lot to play. So what is your decision-making strategy? Do you play the single-player focused games first or the multiplayer focused games? Or do you play the most anticipated game first? Or do you do the save the best for last?
I think adults probably have a different answer for this question
Yeah.
with real jobs
Yeah.
than children.
Well,
because
I think most people will play what they want
Wanna
to play.
play?
Sure.
I would
I
agree.
mean, obligation's something that comes in those other parts of my life. I mean, if I don't want to put the disc in and I just want to just hang it from my neck and run around and just screaming things, I mean,
be the
that's-
whitest Flava
Do it.
Flav
And
of
you
all
always
time, the
pick the
nerdiest
one-
Flava Flav of all time.
Yeah, you also pick the one that the game is best developed for, like
Yeah.
Battlefield 3. You're obviously going to try the multiplayer first.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the
And-
multiplayer in Skyrim first.
Well, and like we do it, some of my friends online and I we achievement whore and trophy whore a good amount, and so like we'll often prioritize multiplayer games because if you need to get multiplayer trophies and achievements, the best time to do that is the first
Yeah.
day
Yeah.
when no one else is too good, when you're not going to run into people
Nobody
that are
else
so
is too
good they're going to
good.
cream you. So like I did that on the Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat games too. It's like, oh, you need to get 10 consecutive wins day one. Like I'm just going to pound on people that don't know where the block button is.
Right.
It's like. So that's a consideration, but generally for me, it's like I'll play what I'm most interested in, or what they send us first.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Like, what did we get in the
Yeah.
office today? I tend to play what I can when I can. I think if I, like last week I had 15 hours of time, I was like, I'm going to try to play through Batman. I'm going to play through the entire game. As opposed to if I would have gotten Skyrim last week and Batman, I definitely would have played Batman, even though I think Skyrim for me is probably my most anticipated game of the year. It just didn't really fit into the time frame I had in my
Well,
life.
I
also
always-
one of the reasons I don't play much multiplayer is so many of the big multiplayer games come out at the end of the year where multiplayer, to get a good experience with it, you need to spend time with it.
lot of time with it, right.
And there's always this other game that's coming out. It's like, oh, I got to do that. And then by the time I want to revisit that multiplayer game, everyone's like, oh, I'm all good and stuff. I'm all prestige.
I always default to my favorite game first, and I try to play as much as possible in as short amount of time as possible, hence Uncharted 3, only because I know that once that other game that I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
is going to be on my doorstep, I will probably forget if I'm not finished with the first one to finish it, and I will move on, and then I'll regret that later. So I
Yeah.
try to squeeze everything in as much
And
as
there's
possible.
always one game that I know. I'm like, I can see it every year. There's one game like, I'm not going to get to you.
Yep.
I know
Yeah.
you. I know I'm going to miss you. And the one this year, I think that game is
Saints-
Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
No, I'm on Saints.
You're on Saints Row.
Oh, no, day one.
Matt has
Saints
said that
Saints
Wow.
Row.
Saints Row is Matt's sleeper hit of the year.
Definitely.
So far. He's definitely very excited
I'm
about it.
looking forward to this game as well.
I think it's going to be very fun.
But Assassin's Creed, I love Assassin's Creed. Loved all three of the games. Brotherhood blew me away by being the best game in the series. I think I didn't expect that, and I'm looking forward to this one. But there's sort of that I don't know where to put you in my life. Assassin's
Right.
Creed Revelations.
I think Batman really complicated things because it is in the most basic way styled as like an Assassin's Creed game, and it's like luxuriate in the environment and go do a lot of things. And we're also kind of getting like a massive version of that out of Skyrim, and then you even have like Saints Row. That's a lot of sort of similarly styled games that really ask a lot of your time.
Right,
Yeah, because we run into this. I know we've talked about this for years and years, but we run into the issue of like sometimes it's harder to make time for the game that is going to be a known quantity. Like I know Assassin's Creed is going to be good, and I
Right.
know what I'm going to do when I play Assassin's Creed. So I'm more interested in these games that are X factors.
Right.
And one interesting thing for me this year is that a game series that usually is that type of game is Zelda. And this time with Skyward Sword, I have no idea what I'm walking into with that game. I'm just like, because it's so different.
I have not looked forward to a game more in a long time. I really want to play Skyward
I
Sword.
completely forgot it was coming out.
I was very skeptical of it, and then I watched. We're.
Then you watched Video Game of Thrones, and
I
really
watched the reviewer who played it a little bit in our game lab, and I was just like, oh, this looks cool. Like, there's some.
It looks like
there's
it
some cool shit in
recaptures
there.
that kind of fun you had
That'd
with
be great.
Arena.
And here's
I look
the
forward
thing.
to April of
People-
next year. I
people
can't wait to
making
play all
motion
these
control
things in
games.
April of next
People
year.
making motion control games, pay attention to Zelda on this. When you move the Wiimote around, the sword moves 1-to-1.
What? 1-to-1?
Now, is that with-
What a
is that-
concept.
Not when you
Motion Plus?
swing it. It's
Yeah.
like an 8-way
Yeah, with Motion
directional
Plus.
thing. But when you're just holding the sword and you do that, he moves the sword around.
That's insane.
And I
What
can't.
if I have shaky hands?
I cannot emphasize enough how
your
important
defense
that
is gonna
is
be
for those
amazing.
of us who like sharp-bladed things.
Right.
I got the joke.
Thank you very
Good
much,
job.
Jessica. I appreciate that. We have time for one
We're
more
gonna do one
fan
more?
question, and then we're going to get into Uncharted 3, which I believe Adam Sessler reviewed, but I
opinion.
can't. I
thought
can't
it was just some
remember.
out there.
I think I read that on the internet.
I think I read that,
All
Jess,
right.
but we have time for one more
All right,
question.
quick, really quick. G-Spot. G-Spot.
Spelled J-E-E-S. I like what you did there.
Aw, clever. Even
So
if the
clever.
shooters do better commercially, they are rarely considered a contender for Game of the Year. Do you, as video game reviewers, have an explanation for why this might be? What do you think are the main properties of a game that a game must have to win Game of the Year, and why do we not see these things in our popular shooters that seem to outsell every other title?
Well, number
I
one
don't know whether-
property.
wait, is this postulate correct?
Well, we don't generally give shooters Game of the Year.
Yeah, but they're always up
but
there.
we
They're in the
shortlist them.
nominations.
We shortlist
yeah, we
them.
always
Yeah.
we always do
They're
that.
high.
But
Um,
it doesn't. And I'll take a shot at that in the sense that a lot of the shooters that are very, very popular are very, very popular because of their multiplayer. And a Game of the Year decision on our show or on our staff is a communal decision. And oftentimes with games like, very intense competitive multiplayer, there's only one or two or three of us that play them very
Right.
seriously. So that doesn't have the same appeal to everyone. And then you've got games like, say, Mass Effect 2 that everyone got something out of that. So
Right.
it partly comes because it's sort of a group decision. And
Well, but it's also, and I think what you hit on, and this is a nice segue to Uncharted 3. I mean, obviously, yes, I got a little bit ranty about giving numerical scores to things, but that same problem comes to Game of the Year, is that, games are not the same kind of fixed object as a
Sure.
movie or a
You-
book where
you
can,
have to be
everyone
s-
has the same experience, and that's the thing. Multiplayer is like a girlfriend, and single player is like a date. So you can date a lot, but you're only going to eventually settle down with one, because most people I know don't dabble in 4 different multiplayer
Sure.
games, because you're just going to weaken your skill level at any one of those games.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why these types of evaluations just completely kind of fall apart
Right.
when you apply them to video games, because it's a wholly different entity than anything we've seen before.
And that's why I think we see even across the board. I mean, there are a lot of not so reputable game company or game review companies out there, but by and large, even the most respected companies out there tend to disagree about what their game of the year is, because it's impossible to be completely
Yeah.
objective about these things.
except Uncharted 2.
Except for Uncharted 2, which did something different. I think that was the year. I mean, the properties vary. I think a lot of people are going to probably put Skyrim, without even having played it, on their short list, just because Skyrim, they're trying to do something different. And that's what Uncharted 2 did as well.
Would you say in multiplayer there's not really a lot of experimentation with adding and challenging, adding the difference?
I think the multiplayer experience
because
is-
what you do see is you see nuance change
Sure.
from
But
your
you've got
year.
But your
You've got-
multiplayer experience is typically contingent on how good you are at multiplayer. Whereas a single player, you don't have to be good at video games to enjoy something like Uncharted 2, because you can play
Yeah.
that and experience it at your own pace. I play Battlefield 3 I'm not good at first-person multiplayer shooters. I didn't have the best time in Battlefield, but I knew that it was a good multiplayer experience. I just got killed 1,000 billion
Yeah,
times.
but
and
good doesn't necessarily equal to Game of the Year.
Right.
Well,
Right.
it's also,
But also, it's neither as popular, because he's also asking, how come the
Well, I
games that
agree.
sell
That's
the
why
most
I'm saying. Do you think
don't you
not
know.
necessarily popular. It's not a popularity contest.
I don't know. Go talk to the internet. It might be.
It shouldn't be
Yeah,
a popularity
those same people
contest.
better be given Transformers 3 movie of the year
Yeah.
because and I don't think so.
Yeah.
We
That's
just
the
look.
thing,
We'll never
it's
be able to
just-
agree on these things. I mean, it's always going to be that way. I mean, there
No,
might
we're
be
gonna
those
find
that are-
consensus.
Well,
there's
Get
always
with
my-
the board.
There's 5 points you need to hit in
Right.
every game, and if you hit them, it's game of the year. It's that simple.
No,
That
but
we're never
also
going to
remember, there's always that my internet. One of my major internet postulates: nothing is so terrible that someone on the internet doesn't love it, and nothing is so great that someone on the internet doesn't hate it.
Right. And typically that's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of times it's the exact same thing. And speaking of things that you either loved or hate, depending on whether or not you watched Adam's soapbox or read his review this week, which we're not going to get into because we don't have enough time for that. But the game as a whole, Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. Adam, you reviewed it.
It's a really good game. It just is not a game. As I had tried to explicate in the review, it had struck me as a little bit odd as I was playing it that God, we've only had 2 years since Uncharted 2, which was really kind of a watershed moment in terms of game design, game presentation. And a lot of it was still very, very resonant. And I know that I was like, as I was playing it, I was thinking, this is a really good game, but it doesn't seem to have that sense of vitality that Uncharted 2 had. And I think, well, all those trappings that made Uncharted 2 so remarkable, which is the presentation, which is that cinematic way, they have better camera shots than this one. And the transitions from cutscene to gameplay are just still that almost like
Completely
mind-blowingly seamless
Right.
thing. But it just didn't have that spark and that sense of life. And I found a lot of those major set pieces to be a little bit too reminiscent of what had happened in Uncharted 2. And at the same time, I couldn't help but get out of my head that, well, what I mean, with only 2 years to do the development and having to make a game, there was only so far that they could really remove themselves from Uncharted 2. And as a result, it just kind of felt a little bit like an echo. There were moments in it that were quite fantastic, especially the stuff in the boat shipyard.
Oh, that was
Fantastic.
unbelievable.
Which I think exceeds any of the set pieces to be found in Uncharted 2. But the oddity of that was how it had actually no bearing on the narrative. It was kind of a strange diversion that had it been removed from Uncharted 3, probably no one would know it was missing, except for maybe the fact that the game would have felt shorter than it actually was. And that narrative, which is the one thing that could have really distinguished it from Uncharted 2, is telling a new story, doesn't hold together. They're moving in incredibly interesting directions at the beginning, and then it doesn't resolve itself. And in fact, when it does resolve itself, it feels like there was supposed to be something there that would have actually given some gravity, given a little bit more of emotional depth to the proceedings. And had that happened, I think it really would have highlighted, it really would have helped compensate for the fact that they were not able to match the shock and awe of the tutorial sequence from Uncharted 2 from the of the train sequence and of the
Right.
helicopter chase.
Yeah,
See,
if it was a movie, I felt like it feels like something that went through a lot of rewrites.
Yeah.
I would have said it. Yeah, exactly. A lot of editing. I mean, how do I say this without giving a lot of stuff away? From the first half of the game, there were some fortune-telling cards that were never really
Yeah.
You were never
There were-
told what
Excellent,
this
excellent
is-
metaphor.
There were some
This is
Chekhov
about-
guns that were never fired in the third
There was-
act.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
There was a lot of all of a sudden Chloe and everybody kind of just disappear and you never talk to them again and you're like, but wait, we've been doing
and this
whole
whole
thing.
idea of their disappearance is what was one of the things I love that they set up is this pathological need on Drake's part to have to find treasure, causing danger and harm to those he cares about around him. And it doesn't go there. And then the other thing I'd point out in the review, and Matt I know was on me with this, is once it was all about Sir Francis Drake working as an agent of Queen Elizabeth I because she did have a secret service, which I've always been really fascinated by. And the bad woman's name, her name is Marlowe. Christopher Marlowe, the playwright, was an agent of Queen Elizabeth's Secret Service because he was an atheist, and they used him to go into France to spy on the Catholics. I mean, I was like, wow, this is going to get into all this wonderful aspect of English history that you don't hear about that much. And, frickin' Roland Emmerich's not going to be talking about it.
Yeah.
That movie.
But then you realize that you were playing a
And
video
you know
game.
what? It doesn't get into that kind of fun mystery. And I have to say,
It
I
dips its
love
finger
Naughty,
in it, but
Naughty
that's
Dog,
it.
and I refuse to believe that they called that character Marlowe without at least considering the fact that there was,
Yeah, it was
with
definitely
the history.
No, I mean,
and I think
they-
didn't they even mention that?
They actually mentioned 007.
Yeah, they mentioned John D. They don't
Yeah.
get into.
They're talking about John
Marlowe.
D. Yeah.
And they kind of dip their finger in the whole, like, mysterious mysteries in the background running things kind of thing, but not detailed
Which was also
enough.
very exciting. I mean, you really felt that this was going to bring that historical aspect, which was, what's the name of the fantasy world in Uncharted 2?
Shambhala.
Shambhala. I mean, that's always been this kind of it's almost become just kind of a cipher for mysterious Asian place.
Right.
Whereas, in this, it's tied into more sort of history that people are familiar with. And I love that idea, as Assassin's Creed does, that, you can kind of find all that wonderful richness in history that it just doesn't develop.
It definitely made me want to look these things up, like go and research my own stuff and say, oh, well, this is an interesting story, and I'd like to see how it's connected. But I don't think that is the ultimate goal of a video game. However, I was very surprised at how I finished the game 10 hours, one day, one sitting. I was surprised, and I happened to mention it on Twitter, like, I am determined to finish this. So many people were so quick to poo-poo it, and this is a perfectly good game because they considered it too short, which I have a big problem with because it's about quality, not quantity.
Well, hold on. I'm going to have an aneurysm here. People were poo-pooing Uncharted 2 on your Twitter account?
Yeah.
People were
sorry,
threatening me
3.
over my review on my Twitter account.
Uncharted 3.
Uncharted 3. No,
But
I'm sorry. I'm saying.
it was, well, they were basically telling me, because I had said, okay, I accomplished it, you non-believers, I managed to finish this in a day. It took me 10 hours. And everybody's like, well, that doesn't sound like it's worth the cost. That's way too short of a game. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That has nothing. That's nothing to do
Listen,
with...
we could talk about whether or not people have the right thing to say on the internet until we're blue in the face, but the game itself,
No,
and
I'm
this
just
is one of the
saying,
things...
it is a quick play. I do think that 10
Right.
hours is pretty
But
fast.
but
But
you know,
it's a quality
so is
game.
Uncharted 2.
Yeah, look, it's
No,
not
quality
about
over quality.
the length of the game. It's about the
No,
quality of the game.
it goes back to
and-
the fact that really, it's these numbers, length of game, score of game. It's these really kind of empty signifiers that people seem to be rallying around with this kind of fealty that is actually, I've found to be just a little bit terrifying.
On the
You know, I mean,
aspect of
I've been surviving some strange digital pogrom for the past week
Right.
that is solely around a number and not around sort of an evaluation of the game.
Now, did
And
you
I think
guys
as far as
feel-
evaluating the game is concerned, we obviously had a lot of conversation about the game before I ever started playing it. You'd already played
Yeah,
through.
yeah.
So what I did was I separated it from Uncharted 2 and said, I'm going to play this game as if no other Uncharted game existed. Did I have a good time playing, this 8 to 10 to 12 hours of the game? And I really did. But I think this is a great example of a game that was probably a little hurt by how good the game before it was.
Well, no. But had 4 years passed, I mean, let's use a really clear example. Temple of Doom didn't come 2 years after Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Temple of Doom
you
is
can
also
have
terrible.
the Transformers movie 2 years after another Transformers movie because what's wrong with more after having some?
Right.
I mean, and that when the memory and the significance of that game is so strong, it's going to be in its shadow. And I think Naughty Dog is by far one of the most talented developers out there. And I think with more time to experiment and to think about, where you can go with this character and what you can do with the game, they would have found that fresh thing. I think
I
that-
just
I
don't
do think
think
it's
that.
a little harsh to... Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I was going to say, I do think it's a little harsh to say that this one is being hurt because of the one before it. I definitely don't think that Uncharted 3 is being
I
hurt.
think
by
if
two.
Uncharted 2 had not existed and they released Uncharted 3, I think we would have felt like there was something transcendent that happened.
Somewhat.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I
But
mean,
I
I don't
think
think. I mean, hurt is such a subjective term. What I mean to say is that people are going to
It's-
always take
it's-
into
it's in the
consideration the
shadow.
game that came
But it's
before
just
it.
the second one was better. That's all there is to it. It's and Temple of Doom is an interesting idea
I know,
because
it's not perfect,
Temple
I
of Doom, I
realize.
think, is the weakest of the series.
Yeah.
But yes, including Crystal Skull. Eat that.
That's a great
Oh,
example
my God,
of just
that was
of
awful.
somebody's opinion that may not be your particular.
I never
opinion,
liked Temple of Doom. I think it's a nasty, mean-spirited, dark film, and that's not what I'm there for Indiana Jones for.
Right.
But the trick is, I think, like you say, who cares about every 2 years you get a Transformers movie and more. It's not about that though. It's
Yeah.
about holy crap, we have to get this new movie out based on these toy robots because we don't know how long these fools are going to
Yeah.
last, kind of thing. You got to make your money. You got to make your money. You got to make your money. And I think video games run on the same principle. I mean, Uncharted 3 needed to be out 2 years after Uncharted
It
2
should've-
because
Yeah.
that's
It's-
when they had the
I
place
would
in their
have
schedule for that
made
game.
it the launch game with the new Sony console.
Right. Well,
I
I'm
still
hoping
think
that's the thing is
the next
especially.
Oh, I think it will too.
Next Uncharted, PS4, cut the multiplayer, cut the co-op, give me a long, involved, very well thought out, polished story. Maybe even you could even do like a triple story arc kind of thing,
Three-parter.
like a trilogy in one game kind of thing that really goes into Drake, that really goes into, and also, for God's sake, do not think for a second I want to play anyone other than Nathan Drake in this universe. Like,
Oh,
yeah,
never,
absolutely.
never,
I
never.
want to be Nathan Drake. I do not want to play as Sully. Okay,
Right.
like I love Sully, but I don't want to be Sully. I want to be
Right.
Nathan
I
Drake.
just want to have like Sully mini games, like Sully has a drink.
I
Sully
feel that he
has
just
a-
drinks
Sully
whiskey.
has to
That's
solve
all.
a puzzle on his own because Drake's.
Yeah, and it
No, I'd
better
rather
involve
Sully
setting
just
something
I'd rather
on
Sully
fire,
just
'cause that's all
literally
he's
just
got.
sit there and drink. That would be
I
fantastic.
don't want to see the Yetis come back. either.
No, but I just want to. I just I think there's so much maybe the Vita game will go into this. I don't know, but I want to see. There's a flashback very early. Basically, the tutorial in Uncharted 3 has you as Drake as like a 13-year-old boy, and when he first met Sully and all that. And I really want to know, who is this guy? Why does he know all this stuff? Did he go to college, or did he just go to libraries around the world and bum his way through?
And what happened to him that he has to befriend a 13-year-old boy and raise him all
Who's?
by himself?
No, I meant
No,
Drake.
he's talking
I'm
about
talking about
Drake.
I'm
Drake,
talking about
not
Sully.
Well, and they
I'm
even
talking about
mentioned-
older Sully.
To be fair, Drake, the young Drake calls that out.
Yeah, he's like, what? Do you
He's
not
like,
have
oh, the
friends
police are
your age?
interested why middle-aged
Yeah.
man's following a young boy around a.
They even go a little further with Drake's whole what's his background by. Who is it? Marlowe, I think, questions. or
Yeah, look,
brings
there's a
up
lot
the
of story to be
fact-
explored
There's
there, and I
that.
think we're going to see
Yeah.
that in future games. And fans at home, feel free to write some slash fiction because that's always very entertaining. The point is, though, regardless of whether it was a 4 or a 5 or a 3 or a 2, read the reviews. Read them. Read the reviews.
play the game.
Talk to your
Play the
friends
game.
that
It's
have
a
played the
good
game and play the
game.
game and
It's a
make
good
your
game.
own decisions. And but I think that we can all agree that whether or not it was a 4 or 5, it is definitely a game that you need to pick up and play this year.
I mean, if you care
Absolutely.
about games, you need to.
experience this game.
Yeah, if you like Uncharted, nothing should put you off from it.
Absolutely. And if you haven't seen the online videos of Harrison Ford playing Uncharted, and by playing Uncharted, I
Amazing.
mean clearly playing a video game for the first time ever, I would look up those as well because those are highly entertaining. Thank you guys so much for being here. As usual, always great fun. In the near future, I'm sure we will all be here again talking about Skyrim. I think that's a game we will probably feature as our game of the week in the immediate future. And congratulations to you at home that have won the Bethesda prize pack. I'm not going to say what's in it, but it was free for us. So I'm sure it's going to be amazing. And as usual, you can pick up new episodes of Feedback every Wednesday on g4tv.com/feedback. Jessica, thank you for being here. Matt, thank you for being here. Adam, still not wearing pants.
Nope.
Have a nice day.
It's breezy.